All right. Okay. So this is actually working. Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm doing a Zoom setup, and it's the first time I'm doing Zoom. There he is. All right. So bringing Murray Coleman on.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. And yourself?
I'm good, man. I can't complain. I woke up this morning, so that's always a good sign.
If you're the right side of the grass.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I hear you're in New York. In New
I
York,
am in
as you
beautiful
mentioned.
70 degrees.
It's 17 degrees? No way.
70, 70.
Oh, 7-0. Okay, I was gonna
Yeah.
say like in the middle of the summer. Okay, that's actually quite nice. Does it feel hotter in the city?
No, I'm actually out in Western New York up on Lake Ontario, so it's really quite
Oh,
really chill here. It feels like a winter's day in Florida.
that's awesome. So you've been enjoying the outside then?
Yeah. Yeah, we've got got some boats up here we're tinkering with and been just hanging out and work from here. I have an office up here and been
Okay,
commute backwards and forwards.
very cool. Now, do you have actually like do you have a brokerage up there?
No, no.
You just have an office that you work out of.
Yeah.
I gotcha. I gotcha. Okay. Well, welcome to the podcast. So this is the Ortiz Anomaly podcast, and I'm here with Murray Coleman. He is a broker of KW. How many brokerages do you actually oversee, Murray?
15 and that includes a property management company and a referral company.
Oh wow. Okay. How
Keeps
did
me
you
busy.
even get into brokeraging? I know you got a long history of all kinds of stuff. Where did brokeraging even come into play?
Yeah, that sounds suspicious, but I pretty much had I pretty much had three career blocks of 15 years each. So
Okay.
I was in law enforcement for 15 years. I was in labor relations for 15 years, and then just about to hit 15 years in the real estate industry.
Now, when you were in those other two careers, were those in the United States or were those in another country?
Yeah, I was in the British police for 15 years, and then I ended up starting my labor career in the Detroit area. So that's how, um, yeah, bizarre, right?
Yeah, I would never have expected Detroit from Brazil. What got you to Detroit?
Um, Basically, I spent a lot of time there. I had friends there, and I was at the kind of point in my police career where I either had to make a decision for it to be a long term to do the 30 to 40-year career
Hmm.
path, or I was going to get out of public service and get into private. And it was a tough decision because I held a rank in the police. I was an inspector. It came with fairly good salary and with good potential to go on further. But with a police career comes a great deal of public scrutiny. You basically in the public eye all the time, especially as a command officer.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the intrusion into my personal life. So
Okay.
that was one of the reasons and plus, as everything, things get political. And I found that the police was going in a direction that I really didn't want to go in. So,
Interesting. Now, inspector, is that like police chief or police captain or something that's
and it
similar, or?
doesn't really translate to the US in
Oh,
such.
okay.
It's in between the rank of lieutenant and captain,
Gotcha.
and it's a command position. So an inspector could be in charge of a precinct, the equivalent of a police precinct. I was an inspector in charge of a platoon as such. So I had three sergeants and I think about 40 officers, and we covered the city for 8 hours of the day, kind of thing. So on a
Wow.
revolving shift, and so
Yeah,
there were
yeah.
So there was I did that for a while, and then there's obviously other roles within the police. I pretty much did every role that there was, from detective to dealing with road accidents, and
That's cool.
and I had but my love is the law, as far as all kinds of law. So
Hmm.
I actually taught for 3 years at the police college and taught law and practice for 3 years there.
So you practice law. Was there a specific kind of law that you practiced?
No, I went to law school and
Okay.
studied law, graduated law school. My interest was I had a great deal of interest in criminal law, obviously, but I had a sort of nagging interest in labor law and
Okay.
history of the unions.
Mm.
As a police officer, I was involved in dealing with uh, strikes and union unrest, and I just was fascinated by how how the government and unions worked. For want of a better word.
That's really interesting. So I'd be interested to hear your opinion on, here in the United States, we have pretty weak unions here. It's also, usually based state by state. For example, Florida is a right to work
Yep.
state, where a place like where you're at now, New York, they have actually some pretty decent union organization there. Like how do you see unions in the United States? And in your opinion, based on what you've seen, like,
Yeah.
is that something that's solvable? For from in terms of being able to resolve some of the labor issues that we're running into.
Yeah. I think one of the great things that I was able to get in the position I was in, as a negotiator for companies with unions, and on the other side of things, making sure that workplaces were safe and had no um, you know harassment, safety as far as equipment was concerned, as well as other people. And I
Mhm.
think it's I got the sun just beaming down on me now, so hopefully it's not too distracting. It's just
You're fine.
shining off my head. But the I was very much Switzerland, in as much as I had no real hard political leanings towards whether a union is right or wrong. I think my mindset was, it doesn't matter whether the company is creating a good work environment or the union. And if the company weren't making it, then welcome a union into the workplace to
Yeah.
protect the workers. I think we've seen successive governments over the years, with legislation, have watered down the ability of unions to provide a service, because we've had the Family and Medical Leave Act come in. We've had um, the all the hours, unfair labor practices have been eliminated in with a lot of legislation. Um, and also the big thing that I tackled in those days was the abuse that companies had of the hourly employee uh, status versus the salaried status. So, you could be a cafe manager in a bookstore and be salaried at 21,000 a year and work 40 to 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
They were kind of saving money by getting round having to pay them hourly and creating this mythical management position, which was really not management. It should have been an hourly work. But
Yeah.
yeah, so there was a lot of abuse like that, and I just found it interesting. It's like, it's funny because, or funny, strange, my every career I've had has required pretty much the same balancing act of these three careers are very similar. I don't do very anything much different today than I did as a beat cop when I was 19 years old in Eastern England.
So
So
every once in a while, you're gonna have to take down a realtor for just not behaving appropriately, that kind of thing.
just handcuff them and give them the old British Bobby clip round the ear with a wooden stick.
That's too funny. Oh
Well,
my goodness.
I think someone asked me on a podcast recently, what is the sort of thread that runs through those careers. And I think, I couldn't really answer it at the time, other than, having good communication skills, and being able to work situationally with all kinds of people. In the
Mhm.
police, you're dealing with people from royal, we're dealing with the royals right the way down to the common person.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
and I think, it's being I see myself as a situational leader, and having the ability, if you've got the ability to quell disturbances in England without a weapon, um, and be able to talk yourself in and out of trouble. I used to say, it's very easy to talk yourself in and out of trouble.
Sure.
And I think, and especially with employee relations and labor relations, it's finding out what people's needs are and addressing them. And
Hmm.
the same in real estate.
Interesting. Now you had mentioned, and this is, I know this is kind of like digressing, but I know that British police, you guys don't carry any arms, right?
In the period of time that I was on the streets was sort of 73 to 87, basically. And during those years, the police were becoming more and more progressively armed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in daily day, they weren't overt weapons being carried. When I first joined, it was kind of comical. It was like the Keystone Cops. If you needed a weapon in the night for a situation, you had to call the assistant chief. This was a 3,000 strong police department I worked for,
Hmm.
and you'd have to get an assistant chief to authorize the opening of the weapons box at the police station, and you'd trundle in, pick up an old rusty Smith and Wesson 38, blow the dust
Hope
off
it
it.
worked.
Yeah, and then you'd then sort of try and find where the ammunition was. But
That's
and then as I left, policemen were walking around airports with submachine guns, and on the
oh
streets
wow.
of London with automatic weapons.
But
And it
now
was just,
they don't have him, right? Isn't that
yeah,
is that
no,
my
they have them.
they
So
do?
if you watch any British TV show, and there's plenty of them in America, I think there's more British shows on on my television these days than there are American. But you'll notice the police cars, they have an orange ball, a dot on the roof of the cars, and a number. The
Okay.
ones with the orange dot are carrying weapons.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that for a fact, but that's what I was told when I asked what the orange dot was for.
That's too funny.
I'm not a member of the inner sanctum anymore.
Right.
But if you've only got to get off the plane at Heathrow and just see the amount of weapons that the police have, and on the streets of London, pretty much, you're not that far away from an armed officer anytime.
Okay. Okay. I don't know why I thought that that was a thing that they were trying to they got rid of like weapons for the police departments.
No, it's getting more. They're getting more and more armed, and the public. It's very difficult to get hold of a weapon in England due to um, the laws. That they
Mhm.
have some archaic uh, firearms laws that I was dealing with. I haven't kept up with it in the last 40 years, or 35 years. But in my day, you literally could have a 15-year-old person carry a loaded shotgun in public,
Mm.
because and yet you couldn't have an air weapon at 15.
Oh,
And
that's
and and
funny.
the reasoning was the laws grew up from the historic farmers and landed gentry. So the lords wanted to have someone walking behind them with a shotgun, and then it didn't really translate. So I'm hoping that they modernized firearms law since I was there.
At least that part of it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's funny.
it's strange.
Well, I obviously, this podcast is about real estate and the economy, and I know that we kind of digress into some other stuff, but you're just a really interesting person to me, so I always have a lot of questions
That's
for
okay. We can edit that out.
outside of real estate. But I did have a just because there's a lot of, arguably there's turmoil that we're seeing in real estate. And from a number of different directions, right? There's this NAR settlement that's happening. The economy is kind of acting kind of weird. I mean, do you see anything specific that in your mind is making the real estate market, I think, more tumultuous, just more, problematic or complex? Is there
Yeah.
something in particular that you think is like a little bit more of a challenge than another?
I think so. Just to put it into perspective, I've been around real estate just by default, really. My wife was a real estate broker, and I got interested in it about 15 years ago when she was a broker. And as a result of that, I kind of just was on her shirt tails. I wasn't, I was at a point in my life where I wanted to change. My 15 years was up in human resources and labor,
Mhm.
and I get that itch at 15 years,
Yeah.
and started to dig into it. And it was right at the time of the crash.
Mm,
So I was helping her navigate the foreclosure market
mm,
and all the short sales that were happening. And that I thought was a tumultuous time. I then have seen, as our company says, if you look at all house prices, they've risen since the beginning of records at 4% a year. We've
yeah.
seen we've seen 20%. We've seen um, them crash down, but
Hmm.
the median is 4% increase a year. And once people understand that, and not to react to the dips and the highs,
Yeah.
I firmly believe that it's a very reactive business. It's a short-lived business for a lot of people. They come into real estate, do 3 or 4 years, and depending on what ride they're on, depends on what their experience is.
Yeah.
And steel sharpens steel, but it's the ones I've seen be very successful and have longevity are the ones that just are the masters of the market that they're in. You know,
Mm,
I tell people all the time, I'm not a salesperson. I do not sell real estate.
yeah.
I work with 2,500 agents that do sell real estate. So
Right.
I've seen every single way that people operate in the business. And the one thing I can tell is the ones that are successful will not look at this market today and think it's any kind of problem,
Mm,
because it isn't.
I like that. Yeah.
All we're doing is we are becoming there's 18 other states out there that have lived this life of no commission in the MLS,
Hmm.
and and fiduciary relationships with their clients. They've lived that, and they're looking at Florida now and saying, what's all the fuss about? Why are you thinking this is a bad thing?
Right.
Uh, Personally, I think that this is most probably one of the best things that's happened to the real estate agents, the role of real estate agents, in a long, long time. And the reason is because it will force professionalism.
Mm,
We're very lucky, you and I, Gus, that we are in an organization that promotes education, just promotes mindset. It doesn't look at real estate as um, a sort of part-time uh, operation where you jump in and work with your neighbor and help them sell their house, or
yeah.
help a relative sell a house or buy a house. We're looking to create a professionalism, and there is an incredible amount of turnover amongst agents,
Oh, for sure.
and the reason is because they're falling through the filter of professionalism, and the ones that do not grasp the fact that you don't just have to be a good salesperson, you have to know how the correct practices of this business should take on, and you keep yourself in education. So why I say this is a good thing is because you won't be able to operate as a real estate agent without knowing what you're doing. And I'm
Mm,
not taking anything away from how things were, but I think most people in this business would agree there's a lot of agents out there that jumped in, passed their real estate exam, bought themselves a new car, stuck a magnet on the side, and went out and tried to represent people in their biggest purchase of their lives.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
it was and I think sometimes I used to think, I don't really want to tell if I was out with friends or new acquaintances, I kind of didn't want to talk to them about being in real estate, because every single person you speak to has a horror story of how badly they were treated during a transaction.
Absolutely.
And it's that's why I stick with the brokerage that I'm with, because I'm surrounded by people that are professional,
Yeah.
and there are a lot out there that are not.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that statement. It was interesting because when everything started coming down the pipeline of how the changes were going to happen and stuff like that, like I was I thought it was going to be really severe. Like I thought there was going to be some really massive changes, and there have been some significant changes, in our profession. But like the big one that everyone was concerned about was this idea of having to like, oh, you have to sign a buyer broker agreement
Right.
and so forth. And I was just like, that's I've been operating like that since 2017. I don't understand like why is everyone panicking about this? This has been kind of my modus operandi for quite a while. And actually, me having that practice made it really easy for me to transition into commercial, because in commercial, like you got to do that because there's
Yeah.
never been any kind of assumption of compensation from one side or another. It's all a negotiation from the top. So I agree with you. I think we're on the same page that this is going to be really good to kind of clean out I guess you could say, filter out some of the murkiness
Yeah.
of our industry, and provide some clarity for some of the professionals to kind of rise to the top, which I think will be good.
Yeah. And the reason the reason that the people are panicking, the agents that are panicking and going, oh, I don't know if I want to do this, is because they have either they don't know their value and can't express their value, or they
Yeah.
don't have a value.
Right.
And if you're going to sit down with a buyer and tell them that you're going to take them on a journey, and this is how much money that you're going to be paid to do that, you better take them on that journey,
Right.
and you better have a value.
Yeah.
Because halfway through that journey, if you just open a door for them and say, well, go take a look at this, and I'll write an offer for you, then the buyer is quickly going to see that this is why am I
Worth
paying
it.
for this
Yeah.
service?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
It's very
Yeah.
easy when you're on the listing side of the transaction. It's very easy to show your value to a seller, because there's three things that govern house sales. There's price, condition of the property, and the marketing. And a good listing agent can get to the price quickly, and can advise on the condition of the house, and accordingly with it's easy to sell our product as far as marketing goes, because we literally do marketing of property so well.
Yeah.
And having the largest, well, I think we are the largest real estate company in the world as far as agents and sales go. I know everyone claims to be the largest. It's one of those things that people
Right.
do, but I think you just have to
Everyone's
look.
number one, right?
Everyone's number one at something. But if you look, I was shocked at some of the statistics. I think a Keller Williams agent is either on the buy side or the sell side every 90 minutes or something like that in the
Oh, wow.
States. I heard that statistic. No, and I just look at my own experience. I oversee about 14 to 18,000 transactions a year, in of 7 to 8 billion in sales just in residential.
Hmm.
Um, that's a lot of real estate.
Oh, yeah.
And that's about 10% of what's being sold in Florida. And I correct my math, but I did it a few years ago just to look. I haven't really paid much attention to it lately, but I do know we have a big slice of the cake.
Yeah, that's a lot of market share.
There's a lot of market share, and what sells houses is relationships. So if we have offices with 400 agents in a very small geographical area, well, I can tell you it's always best if you're working with an agent you trust on the other side,
Oh,
to
for
get that to
sure.
get that you both want to get to the closing table
Yeah.
and give a great experience to your customers. And by having that interaction. And I think that's why a lot of agents are panicking that are not in large brokerages, because they're going to have to talk to people now. They're going to have to
Yeah.
pick up the phone and make sure that they're not burning bridges, that every transaction they leave each other in the transaction with a good taste in their mouth, and not burn that bridge because you're going to be working with that agent again. And as the market shrinks as far as number of real estate agents that are prepared to show their value, will become that a lot closer knit community as we were back in the 80s
Mm,
and 90s when my
yeah.
wife was first in real estate.
Right. Right.
I'm fighting a cold, so just
No
bear
worries.
with me. If I
That's right.
suddenly start sneezing, I'll be good.
Well, so I'd be interested to hear kind of your thoughts, because I mean, obviously there's this NAR settlement and people are kind of freaking out about it, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, because I know there's a lot of a lot of people talking about it in the market.
Yeah.
I'm actually interested to hear kind of your thoughts on some of the other factors that are impacting real estate right now. Now, obviously there's things like the interest rate and stuff like that. The biggest thing that I have some concerns about are just the economy at large. And that's both locally and globally. Do you have any thoughts on, how that has an impact in real estate, or where you think that might drive the market?
Yeah. When real estate is a great litmus test for the economy. If you see real estate suffering, then it's normally the first domino to fall when the economy shivers.
Hmm.
Um, I believe that we are kind of in a recession as far as real estate goes, but it's very geographical. Some markets are great,
Yeah.
some markets are slow, and and they're extremes. So we're I've lived long enough to know that don't don't stick your head out the window and look to see if it's raining during an election year, because someone might be holding an umbrella over you, and
Right, right.
you don't know what the truth is. and
Yeah.
and and it's a sad fact that there's a lot of smoke out there. Election year is all about people um, trying to blame someone for what's happened and then promise what they're going to do in the future. And it's
Mm.
just a continual, every 4 year cycle of here's a
Yeah.
promise. This is the promises that weren't kept before, and it just continues. And nothing bad about either um, political position that people take. It's just a fact of life. They're not going to get everything they promised done,
Right, right.
and people hang on to. I remember back in the 70s, the industrial strife that was in England at the time, where people didn't have heat in their house. There was
Mm.
rolling power cuts, extraordinary prices. They devalued the pound, the currency, to try and get people's wages in line with product.
Interesting.
And I think we're getting close to that here. And how can people think about buying a house when they're looking at their grocery bill each week and wondering, well, where's my income going?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that is where I think that we're losing in out what I'm seeing, just pure anecdotally. I haven't dug into the figures, but I'm seeing more, and the first time buyers are very hard to find.
Oh,
Uh,
for sure.
and I think that's yeah, just a fact, really, because, and I know from my own, I've got 4 kids, and my son has his own house. My eldest daughter has their own house, and then my uh, middle daughter, um, she's just about to turn 30. Whereas I could buy a house when I was 19,
Yeah.
my son could buy a house in his early 20s. My eldest daughter bought a house in her early 20s.
Right.
The other two are now they live in uh, Colorado, so it's a different market to Florida slightly. But if you look at the price of houses versus, even they've got great incomes as well. They've both got good careers,
Yeah.
but that's going to be a huge chunk of money in comparison to the cost of living as far as
Yeah,
buying groceries, buying gasoline.
for sure.
It really the money is not. I suppose to sum it up, money is not going that far.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
shocked if I can get out of a supermarket, or whatever it's called, Instacart. I think it's like everything's $100. You buy
oh
a
yeah,
piece
for sure.
piece of
At least,
cheese and a loaf of bread, it's $100. It's like,
yeah.
it doesn't matter what you buy, it always comes to $100.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's if
That's
you get the cheese.
yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
it's sad, and I think there's and as you've lived the same sort of career, and you see that when people cannot bring home enough money to live comfortably, then we get into the salary wars, where the inflation, where they increase salaries to meet the demands of their workers, and yet prices are still going up as well.
Right. Well, I was actually looking at some data on that, and its salaries have gone up over the last, I think, 5 years, by I think I want to say 3.5%. And so everyone was like happy about the salaries going up 3.5%, but inflation went up like almost 8% over the same time period.
Yeah.
So, even though the salaries went up, like it still has a shortfall of, like 4+% percentage points. So it still doesn't, it's not keeping up with what we're seeing in terms of how like the inflationary rate's happening. So that obviously is detrimental because, back to what you're saying, young folks are just not making enough to be able to, afford a home. I mean, it used to be the household income of roughly $80,000 would get you into a house. And now you have to be at about 120 to $130,000
Right.
to be able to buy the same house,
Yeah.
which is just
And
nuts.
and then you become very house poor. Yeah, they could most probably go out and buy a house because they've got great incomes, but they're
Yeah.
going to then not have the money to do all the other things they want.
Yeah.
Now, it's going to sound strange coming from a real estate person, but we're from a European perspective, we're an odd country. We've sold this American dream of home ownership. Um, that doesn't get pushed in Europe. It's
Hmm.
very common, like in France, for instance, it's very common for people to just rent
I heard
their
about
entire,
it.
yeah. And it's not a goal that people would set themselves
Yeah. Hmm.
in um to take away something else in order to have a house.
Mm.
So I think the priorities of us, and I understand why in America, this is a big geographical location. People don't want to be living on top of each other in high rises in cities. Some do, some, and they do. But
Yeah, yeah,
I think for a good quality of life, it's nice to be out in the suburbs and have your own four walls around you.
yeah.
And so it may happen in the future where young people leaving college will put off that purchase until later in their lives when they've accomplished everything else they want to accomplish.
And we're starting to see that. I mean, I feel like
Correct. Yeah.
that's already starting to happen. I mean, my kids are like, two of my three girls are not really interested in owning property. And we've even talked to them about, hey, we can help you get into your first property and so on and so on. They have no interest in wanting to be a homeowner. They kind of want to do their own thing. They want to be flexible, and it sounds like they may consider it later in life, but right now they're not
Right.
really in doing it. So that's definitely a component. What's also interesting is talking about how we're different than Europe. I think we're different than a lot of the rest of the world because we have this culture of individualism, right? That's a very
Mhm.
big individual rights and individual power, and
Yep.
we all have like our ways of thinking and doing things on our own and kind of standing on our own and stuff like that. Which there are some very positive things that can come from that. I think some of the negative things that also come from that is because we're so individualistic in our tendencies, our culture is to, as soon as you become an adult, exit from your home and you get your own place. And where you see other cultures, like if you look at, for example, some of the Asian cultures, Chinese people and Indian culture, like those cultures are very collaborative in their family dynamics, right? Where they oftentimes will kind of utilize each other to support each other in building a home, and then once they kind of establish some savings and they're kind of set financially, then people will start breaking off from that, and then they continue to support each other. We don't have that same cultural dynamic. It's not that we don't support each other, it's just it's different. And I think there's a culture in the United States of wanting to, like, as soon as you're old enough, get the hell out of the house.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So,
the bedroom is a sewing room within 10 minutes of them going to college. Uh,
yeah.
yeah, I see that. But the other thing I noticed, I totally agree with you that, but the geography of this country it stops the idea of nuclear families. I think
Mm,
so. Let me explain why. When I lived in Michigan, I lived in a very I would say expensive area. You know, we had a house which comparatively was more expensive than the starter homes would be. There was no starter home in that town. So
sure.
every kid that grew up in that town could never aspire to going back and living in that same community. It was
Right.
just economically wouldn't work. So they'd go to college, then by default couldn't come back to that town. And that I thought was odd because in England, I don't think I ever lived more than 30 miles away from where I grew up.
Mm,
And so I, I, I oddly, my grandparents, I grew up on the same block where my grandparents were from the war, from before the war, the Second War. And then my dad bought my his mother-in-law's house, and so I grew up in the house that he bought off his mother-in-law. My mother-in-law stayed there, or his mother-in-law stayed there.
yeah.
And then I went, I went off 28 miles away to police college when I was 16. Came back as a policeman in that town.
Hmm.
Then potted around the county in different stations, but I ended up being the inspector in the town where I grew up in.
That's funny.
And all the people I went to high school with were still there. They were not many had moved away.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and here, because of the geography of it, it doesn't happen. Because
Now,
if and I'll just get this bit out because like where I am at now, there are no starter homes. There are
yeah.
no apartment complexes. They're all houses for mum and dad.
Mm.
So,
So you're saying, and that's an interesting observation. So it's like, there's not a lot of integration between, like, income levels, is what you're saying. We have a lot of,
yes.
like, separation based on, like, the income of the people who live there. They all kind of homogeneously stay together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, where we are in the house we have in Florida, we're in Claremont.
Yeah.
Um, we've been in Claremont since 1999. What's that,
Hmm.
25 years? And we started off with the family home, then had the lake house, and then moved into a town home when the kids were
Yeah.
out the way. And then we're now moved into the downtown, and I just love it. It's most probably one of the most favorite houses I've ever owned. We're in a community like that was built in the 40s,
Oh, nice.
and there's some older houses there as well.
Yeah,
And
it's all
so
mixed.
there are people there that have grown up there. We've got an elderly neighbor across the street who grew up there. She was actually married in our front yard.
Right.
And it's just that history. I love all that. And there are affordable starter homes and it's well, the area. You can literally be in a multi-million-dollar home on the lake at the end of the street and have an affordable 3 bed, two
Yeah.
bath, at the other end.
Yeah.
But you're correct. Most communities in America are pretty far apart in once you get out of the metropolitan areas. You take Groveland for instance. You could grow up in Groveland, and then you would have to move further out into the country in order to find a home that's going to be affordable for you. So
Hmm.
you most probably have to be more than 60 miles away from where you grew up.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of that also has to do with sort of the the planned development model that
Mm.
we have here in the United States, where suburbs are all kind of built, in chunks,
Yep.
right? So all the houses that are in a subdivision are all within sort of similar income, where in like town centers, you have a diversity of homes and property that will be a combination of older homes and newer homes and maybe some apartments, and like it's a mix of the type of home that's there, which allows for what you're talking about, the sort of diversity of income and whatnot, so that
Right.
there's a more, I guess, a less homogeny as it relates to like income levels, because there even lake homes, right? There's some lake homes that have been around, probably since the 40s or 50s,
Yep.
that don't are certainly not as expensive as some of the newer ones that have been put up that might be in the multi-millions,
Yeah.
right? So I think a lot of that has to do with the way that we, as a culture, this is sort of I guess, a capitalist element, which I'm not against capitalism. I love capitalism, but that's one of the sort of the downfalls of it, is that it's kind of built out these suburban areas that, where you don't have that mix. Though I will say, one of the things that I'm starting to see a lot more of from a development side is cities being a little bit more conscious of that, and requiring builders to have a more diverse approach to actually building some of these developments. We're seeing that specifically locally here in Groveland. Groveland has been really kind of a rock star in that regard, with regard to how they're looking at developers and advising them on how they need to develop their properties, so that you see more diversity in those communities, which is
Right.
really great. I think that's a really great approach.
One of the things, Gus, I've also noticed in my almost 70 years on this planet, I notice how different, and this is what grumpy old men always say, is, the kids of today, it was very much pushed into my head when I was a kid to save money.
Mm-hmm.
And I must admit, I most probably wasn't as aggressive with that that particular topic with my kids, but I noticed that my son with my grandkids understands the power of compound interest.
Mm-hmm.
And the children that I speak to today, where we live in New York, it's fantastic. There's lots of kids from young newborn up to pre-teens, and they're here now, kind of, they get some money, they want to go spend it,
Yeah.
and there's a consumerism, and so a lot of people haven't grown up like I did. I was able to buy my first house when I was 19, and people say, oh, well, it's different back then, they were a lot cheaper. They were a lot cheaper, yeah. Comparatively, my salary, let's just I'll say it in pounds, and my salary as a brand new policeman was £2,400 a year,
Mm.
which was uh, at 1.3 would make it about almost $3,000 a year. The first house I bought was 19,000.
Mm.
The interest rate was 17%.
Right.
So pretty much half my salary each month was going towards my mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
But because my dad had made me open up a savings account when I was a youngster, and I'd always, worked little jobs as a kid,
Yeah.
with squirrel money. You got birthday money instead of getting a game or a new soccer ball or whatever. You'd get birthday money and
Right.
savings bonds, and you put it into savings. So I did have that chunk of change and it didn't have to be much back then,
Yeah.
comparatively, but I was able to have, like 1/24th of my house value I had in cash to go when I was 19.
Nice.
Now,
Nice.
we're not encouraging that. I don't see it in the crowds that I
Well,
mix with.
and I didn't grow up that way. Like, my parents never really talked to me about saving. We didn't have a lot of money to begin with. But we didn't really talk very much about finances, or that's not a conversation that happens.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah, I don't
unfortunate,
think it
right? Because,
does.
yeah, I mean, I didn't really get a better understanding of finances until actually I got married, because my wife was actually, she's an accountant.
Right.
So I got a real fast uh,
Yeah.
education and finance and financing and money in general from my wife. Because I mean, my whole life, as a child and as a young adult, I just didn't have an awareness of what that meant. I never really had a lot of debt. I had some, but I never had a lot of debt. And I had friends that had just a crazy amount of debt by comparison. But I never really had a ton of savings. That was not a
Right.
thing that I even knew to do or how to or even think about. I think there's certainly a culture, I think, in the United States to consume. I mean, we are a consumer-based economy, and there's definitely I think there is a lot of I think how could I say this? Capitalism and corporatism have really pushed that message of getting more, as much as
Right.
possible, right? To consume as much as you can, try to be as good as your neighbor. There's the whole like, keeping up with the Joneses that you see a lot of people trying to do, where they're trying to, look like they're rich, but they can barely get by and all that
I
good
know.
stuff, which is just
I know.
insane. That luckily I never had that, and that
Yeah.
I guess instinct to want to do that, but I can see how that can be a problem when you want to keep up with your neighbor who's looking like they're being super successful, but here you are like barely getting by.
Yeah. I've, these super successful people, one of my favorite books is The Millionaire Next Door.
Mm-hmm.
And just, there are a lot of people out there that are flashy, and when you actually scrape down and just see what their debt is, it's incredible. It's very easy in America to drive a Mercedes or whatever car you
Oh, for
think is
sure.
a luxury car.
Yeah, yeah,
I got a Ford pickup and it's paid off, and there's no payments. I'm a no payment person.
yeah. Yeah,
I get great joy when I pull up alongside one of these mega trucks, and I just think to myself, I wonder how much money you're paying for that, and we're going in the same direction, and we're,
yeah, yeah.
it
I'm
just
the
it
same
just
way. I have
my
a, I
da-
have a little,
my dad drilled that into me,
that's
as a
so funny.
youngster. He had an immaculate Volvo 144 uh, car, and it was so clean and beautiful, yet it wasn't new. And he used to just say to me, it's a tin box to get you from A to B safely. And
Yeah,
the guy that's driving the Rolls Royce, he most probably doesn't own it, and he just wants
uh,
everyone to think he does.
that's true. That's
No,
true.
we're doing everything we can not to talk about real estate, but get back to I want to get back to education and um, what we have to consider as employers and as good citizens. I don't hear enough talked about education, and the one thing that's just very stark to me is how we receive our news, daily events and news. As
Mhm.
as a growing up in Europe, I read the newspaper. The newspaper was not opinion. There was a page that said opinion page. The rest of it was factual news.
Yeah.
And over the years, when I go back to England, the first thing I do is I buy my favorite. I know I can get it online, but I get great joy out of buying a Daily Telegraph or a Sunday Times in England. And even here, I love the New York Times on a Sunday.
Hmm.
But as I got older and older, I look for facts and say, well, and try and filter out opinion.
Yeah, and that's hard
And
to do because
right,
there's a lot of opinion being promulgated as news.
and as it comes to our industry, we, I think, need to get better at educating our consumer. And
Mm,
I've been very impressed with some of the programs we have, the Quantum Leap program we have for youngsters,
yeah, that's a great
where we're
program.
teaching them life skills. We're not, yeah, there's a hope that one day they're going to buy a house from the company, but I think the true spirit of this program is just to help young people understand how to deal with money, how
Mm,
to deal with life, how to set goals. And I've I've had a lot of experience with education through my the children going through it, And I'm just shocked at what they actually learned in comparison to what I learned. And even at a young age, and I was not a good student at school. So,
Hmm.
and I still got a good understanding of economics, how the
Yeah.
country works, how politics works. And I find it hard to have a conversation with anyone um, of the younger generation just about how government works and how
Mm.
the economy works.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we're fed people are being fed what's happening today as news and not looking at the mechanics behind it. So it's
Yeah.
very hard for someone to understand why they're buying a house and
Mm.
how they're going to finance that house. And a good real estate agent becomes a partner in that education.
Yeah.
So not
Agreed.
only are you saying to people who are buying a house today, let's go look at houses. You're talking to people who are at a younger stage in their life or a different stage in their life, not quite ready to buy a house, and
Yeah.
teaching them if they want to buy a house, how to buy the house, and what how their lives can be developed to do that.
Absolutely. That's actually one of the things that I talk a lot about as the productivity coach in our market center. To the agents that are coming in is like, we have to make sure that we're educating our clients. That's the way that I built relationships, right? If you can teach
Yeah.
someone, make them feel like they learn something in a conversation, like that in and of itself helps to build relationship. And I've actually applied that towards my commercial career, and that I'm actually surprised because in the commercial world they're supposed to be quote unquote more sophisticated buyers and sellers, and oftentimes they don't really know that much more about the real estate activity than someone who's buying a home.
Yeah.
And part of my role has always been is to really just make sure that they understand like what their options are, how to be able to make a choice. I tell all of my all the agents that are in our program is like, hey, listen, you're not here to make any decisions. You're here to help the client understand like exactly what options they have, what are the pros and cons of those options, and then help them to make sure that they understand exactly what they're getting into so that they can be empowered to make a decision for themselves.
All right. Yeah. Absolutely. And the real estate agent as counselor is a great role to be in, and you'll see that uh, diminishing the over the period of time as this industry gets more professional in Florida, and we do see the departure of people who are just in it for the quick buck that they're going to make by taking someone out and showing them some houses.
Yeah,
If you look at the difference between those people that were just getting in the way of the big agents that were actually consultants and working with groups of customers, taking them on their life journey. I have teams, as you know, that have been in the business 20 or so years and are now generational. They're now working with the children of the people that they sold
yeah,
houses to.
absolutely.
And they've come back to them with the trust that they've built over that time.
Hmm.
And they don't care about competition. They don't need to advertise. They've
Yeah,
got they've got a database of people who they know and trust, and it's not even when they're not selling a house, it might be something different. Some of the best real estate agents I work with are not just looking at selling houses, it's looking at every part of home ownership.
yeah,
There's more to it than just selling them a house, throwing them the keys and moving away.
for
It's
sure.
helping them manage that house, and then maybe talk to them later on about investment. My dad always used to say to me, I've had investment properties in the past, but he always said, it's got to make money from the start. Don't put yourself into debt to buy something that's supposed to be an investment. If you can
Mm.
buy a house cash and it's going to be an income straight away, then do it.
Yeah,
And I think that's where a good real estate consultant can come in and say, okay, let's just take a look at what money you've got and how you can apply that to a positive cash flow.
yeah,
And you don't necessarily, but and um, that that doesn't exist. That skill set doesn't exist in these fly by night agents who just pop in and throw them into a car and then get to the closing table and throw the keys at them. They never see them again.
oh yeah, Yeah,
long-term relationship. And and then that people that you trust. It's like everything. It's like you've got your favorite doctor, you've got your favorite lawyer, you've got um, people that you always go to. I go to the hardware store. I'll avoid going to Home Depot and Lowe's as much as I can because I don't get a customer service experience. I'm
yeah,
prepared to pay another 25 cents for my screwdriver at the local hardware store because it's an experience.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
and if I've stood in Home Depot with just like picked up phones at different desks and started dialing random numbers to try and get someone to help me. And yet you walk into a hardware store and there's normally some guy that you trip over them as they go in they it gets to the point where they're like, well, I'll come round and help you with the project if I have to.
That's so funny. Yeah, yeah, that is so
So
true.
that's where we should be. That's what a good real estate agent is doing.
Yeah.
I talked to one last night who said that he got a call from one of his customers that they had this particular question and wanted to know how to answer them because it was a really kind of complex question. But it wasn't a customer that is working in a transaction now. It wasn't anything about the actual buying and selling process. It was more involved into the home ownership process. But his customer decided that when he had a need, he would call his real estate consultant.
Mm.
And I know that they don't. I get what is it? I've got those. I get magnets with football calendars. I get them from all kinds of different real estate agents. I'm on their mailing lists, which
Yeah.
is great. It puts them to top of mind.
Hmm.
Um, but it's the personal touch. It's being able how real estate develops when you build your database. It's that personal touch. It's not the mass mailing. It's the running into them in Publix and not talking about the housing market as such, but talking about something else, something about the kids. So
Yeah.
getting that connection with them. I
Absolutely. Absolutely.
trust, and I've heard it so many times. It's just so embedded. Is that trusted consultant
Yeah. And
role?
I think that's definitely the direction I think that us as professionals
Yeah,
need to definitely kind of
yeah.
dig into.
You know,
I only have I don't want to take too much of your time. I do
no,
have just two more questions that I wanted to ask.
okay.
One is in your opinion, based on and I know no one can tell the future, but like what do you see for the future of real estate over the next year, let's say, in terms of the market, in terms of agents, just in general? Like what is your sort of like thought on where the future of real estate is going to be over the next year?
Well, as again, I'm not an innovator. I'm an archaeologist. You've just got to look to the past to see
Okay.
what's happened.
Yeah.
And with over the past 200 years, there's been that we know about. There's been dips and peaks,
Hmm.
and we are most probably heading into already in a a dip, and the we will be coming out of it. I don't see any other. People are always going to get married. People born, people die. People are going to have somewhere to live. It's the real estate product is not going to change. It's the people that are involved in it will, and they'll have to overcome and adapt. The big thing that I've seen, I've been out on the road. I was in Florida, did a 8 city sort of week where I taught the new law to different agents around the state. And I looked around these rooms, 100, 200 people, and I looked at them. I thought, you are going to survive. You took the time out of your day to come and listen to me for 3 hours um, in order to improve your business.
Yeah.
And I know that that was most probably about maybe 30% of the people that should have been there were actually there, and they will survive. The
Yeah.
market will be there. The pool of agents will shrink. The amount of business will expand for those individual agents that dive into education, polish up their game, and really look at this as a career.
Yeah. That's awesome. My final question to you is because I know you talk to so many agents on a daily basis. You deal with so many different challenges that come with, for, as it relates to agents and transactions and stuff like that. And because there's a lot of anxiety about, what this business is going to look like over the course of time and stuff like that, and because of all the changes and so on and so forth, people are anxious. So, what advice would you give to an agent who is either just getting into real estate or considering getting into real estate? Like, what advice would you give them to, to get started? Is this something that they should seriously consider, and what should they do to ensure that they can actually build a career out of this?
Right. And this is a very interesting question, in as much as people just fall into real estate sometimes instead of choosing it.
Yeah.
And if you really choose this business, then choose a partner.
Mm,
Pick a horse and ride it. And don't skip from company to company. That's the sign that I see. I see people that, oh, I don't like it here, I'm going to go somewhere else. And the reason why they do it is because they're refusing to change their behaviors themselves. They want to change their environment, thinking that will change their behavior.
right.
It's to listen to the hard facts. The hard facts are the first 6 months are going to be tough. You've got to close some houses.
Yeah.
You've got to invest the money that if you haven't got money already when you come into it, your commission money should be invested in your education and your
Mm,
mentorship, because the turnover in the first year is massive.
yeah.
It's massive. And just get into a company, like our company is fantastic because we are very giving. I don't think there's many real estate companies out there that share the secret of success. I
Yeah.
think, I was absolutely amazed because I thought everyone be hiding their work, and which had been my experience before. I just was amazed that people were, yeah, this is how you do it. And this is, I deal with my customers, my agents who I work for. A lot of them are multi millionaires,
Yeah.
and they are quite prepared to tell new agents how to become a multi millionaire
Yeah. There's a
in
secret
this.
sauce. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no secret to it. And these millionaire agents are humble, and
Yeah.
they work every darn day, and they don't need to. They
Yeah.
literally could step away from their business now, but they
Right.
enjoy what they're doing because they're doing it at a high level.
Yeah.
So pick your horse, ride it, and develop yourself. Read every darn book that there is out there on real estate. Don't get distracted by flashy lights and
Shiny objects.
super courses. There's
Yeah.
the one secret thing to making money in this business is belly to belly with people.
Yeah.
And the
Conversation.
more people you talk to, the more people are going to tell you what their needs are.
Absolutely.
And that's it, Gus. That's my the book according to Murray, as far as it goes. And
That is awesome. Well, Murray, listen, your insight is always well appreciated. I love spending time with you. You always got some really good stories along with just your knowledge. If anyone had any questions for you, do you have a place that people can just kind of find you anywhere?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm an open book as far as you can find me online. I do. We're just working on rebuilding our website here at Murray HQ.
Okay.
Because but right now the best way to get hold of me is phone, and on 352-400-1511. I text.
Okay.
I text like an old man.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, listen, Murray, I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on, sharing some of your wisdom. I'm definitely looking forward to continuing future conversations. So this has been Murray Coleman with broker with KW, and we appreciate your time listening to this podcast. Please like, please share, please comment if you have any thoughts or if you'd like to hear anything else. This has been the Ortiz Anomaly podcast, and I appreciate your time.